Asheesh, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
It's a pleasure to be part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to have you. We don't really know each other, so this is always fun for me to meet new people and jump right into the topic and never know where the conversation is gonna take us. I was on your LinkedIn profile, and something really stood out to me that I thought we would start with, which was a quote from someone, I don't know who, and they said, Asheesh's management style is one of a mentor and a motivator. He has a way of imparting his perspective in a very effective manner, which does not appear overbearing or intimidating. Asheesh knows how to bring out the best in his teams, which I thought was an appropriate place to start, given that we're talking about culture, we're talking about all things teams and leadership and management and coaching. And we'd just love to hear, why is that? Why is someone saying that about you, you think?
Well, you should never believe everything you read on the internet is the first thing to start with. But it was obviously a very nice complimentary praise from a former colleague that tends to make its way onto LinkedIn profiles. And I think what made me, I guess, select that one to put on the profile, despite all the negative ones who said, Asheesh is such an awful leader, I can't believe that I've ever worked for this guy, is I really did like that comment. It sort of, I think, highlighted the element of leadership that I feel is one of the most important elements. And that is thinking of a leader as a mentor and a supporter of people's careers and goals and choices. My own journey helped me get there over time. I certainly wasn't that way, either out of the womb or even out of graduate school. My first organization was one I founded. And when you're the founder of an organization, people tend to think that you have all the answers. And that tends to make you the kind of leader who's sort of making all the decisions. That just doesn't scale. In my second organization, I was hired by the venture capital firms and investors to run it. So it wasn't, quote, my idea, it was somebody else's idea. And I was brought in to help grow that. And that helped me learn a different kind of leadership style, which is to get a team together and really promote a shared vision for where we want to head. Even though I'm not the person in the room with the best idea. So we always were looking for the best idea based on what the management team would brainstorm. And then this particular leadership journey I'm on at JA Worldwide is so multifaceted. I continue to learn and hopefully become better and better as a leader, but it really is a very different organization. It's a very global organization. So JA is in over 100 countries, 115 countries. And each country has its own leader. And we also have regional leaders for Europe and Africa and Asia Pacific. So it's a very global organization, complex organization. And the leadership style needed at JA is that of really, as the quote says, being a mentor and being able to remove obstacles so other people can succeed. If the leader of a particular country wants to accomplish something and is challenged with other resources or partners, I see it as my job to help sort of alleviate the burdens and obstacles that might be in the way for that person to succeed.
And it's supporting their success, supporting their future, as opposed to, I think a lot of folks think about it, how do I get people to do what I want them to do? Which I think is a really important distinction. So why is that your approach? What makes that valuable approach?
Well, I think I do believe that you have to customize your leadership style for any setting that you're part of and the culture of the organization that you're part of. And Junior Achievement has an incredible culture. I mean, to think that this organization has lasted 100 years is actually saying something in today's world where I guess we're entering our 102nd year now. And I think the reason that we've been able to be that resilient, while many other for-profit and nonprofit organizations have not, is we're able to change with the times, and we're able to modify our governance structure and the way that we deliver programs to students to really be responsive to the relevant trends. So today we're going through a digital transformation, like you can imagine almost every organization who's been impacted by the pandemic. We've had to deliver our programs in a more digital format. That's led to a whole different set of ways we collaborate, a whole different set of rules, a whole different way in which we even communicate about the investments that we make to each other in our organization. And I'm really proud of my colleagues around the network. In fact, we even kind of call it a network. We're really a network of teams, Tom. So we've got teams in all these countries of between 5 people and 50 people with a high degree of autonomy. So it's really important when you've got that level of autonomy that people have a willingness to share and a willingness to communicate about the intellectual property they're building. We've all signed a member agreement in this big, great organization that we share our IP. So we've got this wonderful culture of sharing intellectual property.
And you've mentioned culture a few times, which is one of my favorite words, obviously. What is culture to you? You know, we talk about it a lot. It gets talked about on LinkedIn articles and Forbes articles and Harvard Business Review. But for you, what is the essence of culture, and why is it so important?
What's the way that people treat each other and people talk to each other and listen to each other? I think that to me is the core to culture. I don't think it's about vision statements, and I don't think it's about mission statements, although those are important. I think it really is about human behavior and communication. We have this framework we've introduced a few years ago here called fixed, flexible, freestyle. So some things that are globally fixed, some things that are regionally flexible, and many, many things that are locally freestyle. And one reason we had to introduce this is in the past, the way that decisions are made at this organization were always through operating agreements between entities. And while operating agreements have an important role, they are very limiting because you can't renegotiate them all the time. And it makes the organization move slowly if you've got to wait till you've got to change, how you interact with another person based on a new agreement you sign with them. So this language of fixed, flexible, freestyle really helped us move quickly, helped us create projects that we were collaborating on, and really leverage the fact that we truly are a network of teams, not sort of old-fashioned language, which sort of is being called a federated nonprofit organization. I really hate those words, and I try to avoid using them, although I guess legally it is true. I think network of teams, it is a much more empowering way to build a culture, to think of ourselves as a series of autonomous groups of people around the world, all with a shared goal, working together.
Which I think is especially instructive. It's here we are at the end of 2021. The pandemic is still very much a reality and probably will be for a while. And, our clients, CEOs that we talk to are seeing this shift in just the world, right? That it's hard to find good people. And that fundamentally, I think what's going on is Adam Grant talks about as this march towards freedom, that people are really craving that autonomy that you're talking about and that flexibility that you're talking about, and that I haven't thought about freestyle, but that's a great word. And I think that most organizations really need to rethink their underlying model and how they think about, business. Is it from the old sort of industrial era of top down to how do we empower people on the front lines, the people that are closest to the actual work? And so I'm curious, if you were to give other CEOs out there who are looking to move towards what it sounds like you guys are doing a really great job of, what would you say to them?
Well, we did this really interesting study with EY, where we surveyed young people, millennials all over the world. I'm sorry, we surveyed Gen Z all over the world. And these sort of teenagers and early 20-somethings responded to the survey. And one of the things that came out of it universally was this desire for choosing careers where you could have creative control over what you do. That was more important than money, more important than many other factors. Although I suspect, as these young people age, things like money become more important. But certainly when they're young, this idea of creative control was so important. And of course, that led to us seeing the results of the survey of people becoming, entrepreneurial or wanting to be entrepreneurial, where they felt they didn't have to be tied down by a hierarchy. But in reality, there are many organizations, we know this, that even though they call themselves an organization, are really groups of entrepreneurial people who come together to collaborate. That's really all they are. And I mean, JA just happens to be one of them. There's so many other organizations that are structured really as networks, alliances, and coalitions, not as hierarchies. And I do believe that the organizational forms of the future, if you look at even what's happening with blockchain, right? Decentralized autonomous organizations and decentralized decision-making, which are bound together with technology or bound together with a brand, is the organization of the future. I used to work at Virgin. So I spent part of my career working for Richard Branson, which is pretty amazing in my, about 10, 15 years ago.
Wow.
And one thing that he's done so well is he's built a culture at Virgin that attracts both great staff and great customers to the brand. He's made the brand really exciting. And Richard has this ability to, of course, showcase brand values that are very authentic to him, right? Innovation, fun, customer first. And each Virgin entity is actually a separate management team that may not be fully owned by Virgin. So there really are people who just want to be part of the brand. That's really all it is. And I mean, I'm not sure if JA is quite at that level of excitement or fun to be part of, but we hope that the JA brand attracts people around the world to really be associated with it. I know, Tom, you had your own experience with JA, but we have experiences like yours all over the world in 110 countries, 115 countries, where both the volunteers who come into the classroom to help kids, the youth that we serve, the funders, the board members. We have over 8,000 board members, Tom, all over the world, over 500,000 volunteers. Wow. Serving over 10 million young people annually, and an alumni network, which is now over 100 million people who are living. And we're doing our best to start to connect them using technology to make them really feel associated and loyal to our brand.
Wow. That's amazing. 100 million alumni out there. And I was one of those. It definitely changed my life. As I told you before we started talking, when I was working for Intel out in New Mexico, I'll never forget that first chance to get in front of kids and with really solid, just thoughtful, elegant, like simple to the point curriculum that the Junior Achievement had done. That was 23 years ago. It's hard to say out loud. But definitely changed the trajectory of my life. And I'm sure it's done that for those 100 million folks. So what's next? What's got you excited about the future of JA worldwide?
Oh, there's so many things we're doing. I'll just give you a few. So we are upgrading and modernizing our brand. You're going to see a new brand rollout in the coming weeks and months. We are launching more and more programs for young people who are, in high school and coming out of school. We've historically been very strong in certain countries in middle school and expanded to elementary school in some countries. But for high school, we have, for example, an entrepreneurial skills pass that was actually developed in Europe. This is a really cool program where kids who come out of high school, where they've actually had an entrepreneurial experience run by JA, where they've actually built a business while they're in school, can showcase to employers and universities by getting a micro credential that showcases that they've had that experience, built those soft skills. I'll tell you just from my own experience in JA, when you go through in your teenage years the experience of building a real business and having the title of CEO or Chief Marketing Officer or Chief Financial Officer, your willingness and likelihood to do it again is much higher. Or put differently, if you haven't done it in high school, your chance to magically think of yourself as being, able to be a CEO at the age of 27 or 33 is much harder to imagine. For a lot of kids, if you can't see it, how do you believe it? And if your parents or your relatives or your parents' friends, haven't been, financially successful or haven't been CEOs or haven't had a career in one of these companies, how can you even think that you're capable of it? It takes that investment in young people to connect them to role models. And our programs do that in high school, but it's hard for young people to showcase that they have those soft skills. So we built a micro credential, which allows them to showcase that. That's something we're pretty excited about. We've expanded it in Europe. It started by JA Europe, my colleagues there, and now it's in over 50 countries. So wow. Depending on where you're listening from, stay tuned. It might be in a country where you're based soon.
Coming to a country near you.
Exactly.
For those of you who don't know, micro credential is in essence sort of a a credential that shows you know a specific skill or topic or competency. And I think it's very much the future of learning, frankly. We've got these degrees. I've got my MBA from Notre Dame, but it's sort of a proxy for my level of intelligence or competence or whatever, work ethic. But it doesn't really break it down to the credentials or micro credentials that you're talking about. What does Tom actually know? So that's exciting that you guys are doing that already, and making that happen.
Well, a lot of micro credentials, Tom, are for college kids right now. And the reality is high school kids also want to showcase what they've learned.
Mm-hmm.
So we're building really one of the first globally recognized micro credentials for high school kids. And it'll give them so many choices for what they want to study. If they want to do university right away, want to do university later, want to go to the workforce for a couple of years. I'm very excited about it because I do believe that this future, Tom, that you articulated about micro credentials being one more element that allows you to show to employers what you're capable of is going to be very important for the future.
Yeah, because it shows what you actually know, as opposed to thinking that we might know what they know, and the very imperfect interview processes that go along with that, and all the flaws of our current hiring practices and whatnot. So why this? Asheesh, you got a very impressive background. I think Wharton is in there, Oxford. Obviously, you've done startups, you've done venture-backed initiatives. You're now CEO of this tremendously impactful global organization. But why JA? Why Junior Achievement?
Well, I went through JA as a kid, so I have a very authentic experience to sort of knowing what it can do for young people, particularly, as I said before, the time of your life when you are most susceptible, I think, to be connected to somebody who can change your own trajectory is during your teenage years. So I was very excited with the ability to work with an organization that reaches people in that stage of their life. JA is now one of the 10 most impactful NGOs in the world and has been ranked as such for the last few years. And I really do believe that what the world needs now more than really anything is organizations that bring people together and bring people together with a shared mission. And JA is a uniquely global organization. I think people don't realize how global we really are. And we do, I think, bring people together. I mean, people from all political stripes, people from all religious backgrounds want to teach young people to be more entrepreneurial, want to teach young people to have financial literacy skills, want to prepare young people for the future of work. We operate in Saudi Arabia. We operate in China. We were one of the first NGOs actually, able to serve kids in China. We operate in Russia, in both Israel and Palestine. So we are, in my view, and I'll say this with all humility, I think one of the organizations that truly is changing the world. So for me, it is such an empowering group to be part of. And I really wish, frankly, that I could connect my colleagues from one part of the world to the other. I wish we had enough money to actually even pay for the flights to get people connected, because I think when people meet each other, even more than Zoom, I mean, Zoom, of course, works up to a point, and Teams, they're great technologies, but when people meet, it's magical what happens. And when we bring young people together at our student competitions, I mean, they become business partners for the rest of their life. I could tell you story after story of those 100 million alumni who met through JA events, who then stay in touch. And now it's easier than ever through social media. I mean, kids are just connected and they end up doing projects together and working together. And it gives me so much hope for the future.
Mm. You're literally getting more animated as you speak, Asheesh. But you still haven't given me a direct answer, but why this for you? What is it about it that's so personal for you?
Well, I mean, I was at the stage of my life after I sold my last company. I sold the company to Interactive Brokers, which is a public company. So after the first company was bought by Virgin, the second company was bought by Interactive Brokers. Both, I think, really great organizations. But I felt doing another tech startup and hoping that it would be acquired by yet another company didn't feel to me as the most impactful way I could use my time. So to make it personal, Tom, I really felt, what could I do with my time that would have the most impact? both for me and my family, but also for my community and for the world. And when the opportunity to lead JA came about, I felt that, I'd had some experience raising money. So for example, in our first company, we raised money from Jeff Bezos and from Pierre Midyar's a VC firm, and got bought by Richard Branson. So I felt I had this experience networking with people who could use their investment dollars and their philanthropy dollars for good. And if I could use that sort of skill set to do more for the world, wouldn't it be better than just doing another tech startup? So that's my honest answer to your question of why. Although I don't think it's about me at all. I mean, this is an organization that has staff in every country that is effectively raising money every year from ground zero to sustain our operations. And it's their hard work that enables this organization to really survive. What I've really tried to do is to make the brand more exciting and more impactful and be part of something bigger. People can feel part of something bigger than themselves. And I think that's what great brands do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate your humility there and your pointing to the organization, which is true. And it takes great leadership, and for our listeners out there, especially for our younger folks, I think it's really important that they connect and they hear from CEOs like you about what is it that really animates your heart at the end of the day. And what I think I heard in that was, it's not another tech startup. You've done that and that was great, but now you're looking at how do I use the time I have in life to make a difference in the world. And when you can do that effectively, I think, not quite this simple, but everything else kind of falls into place. When you, as a CEO, you can put yourself out of the driver's seat in a ego perspective and get your focus on helping others, then the stars align.
Without a doubt. I mean, when you focus on helping others, magically you end up helping yourself along the way. It's just, it's karma. I mean, that's just the way it works. Tom, you told me your own story of how you've switched your career to helping others as well. And every time I talk to people where they make that pivot in their mind, they end up being far more happy and far more successful. So it is, I think, a secret shared with young people. I think it takes a while to learn, frankly, because in your 20s and 30s, that's not naturally the way you think. But I think it's an important lesson to share.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I took this great class at Notre Dame. This is, about 13 years ago now. And he was talking about the sort of a meaningful life. And it started with, we start with sort of a pleasant life, that this idea of like, what makes a pleasant life? And that leads into this next level of engaged life, which is great. You're really engaged in what you do. You're excited about what you do. But even bigger than both of those by 10x is a meaningful life, is a fulfilling life, a purposeful life. And I think in many ways, you're right. It takes some time, it takes some wisdom, it takes some life experience to get there. But boy, oh boy, if folks out there can shortcut their life to get there more quickly, what you just said, I think is so true, Asheesh. You will find your life just that much more meaningful, that much more purposeful, the quicker you can get to that way of thinking.
But one thing I'd also share is that if you look at the trends for the job market of the future, young people who are graduating today are likely to have at least 20 jobs and at least 7 careers.
Wow.
So there will be a lot of pivoting and changing, and even a lot of involuntary transitions of people who, just by virtue of the economy changing as fast as it is, will have to leave jobs not of their own volition. And to have the skill set, to have the resilience to go from opportunity to opportunity. I love this old Winston Churchill quote: "Success is defined as moving from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm." I love that. That's sort of so relevant for the future. And I think JA does teach young people to have that resilient skill set to get through challenges, to sort of build your business, at least for one of our programs called the JA Company Program, that is core to.
All right, Asheesh, I think we lost our connection for a second, but why don't you go ahead and say what you were saying again about this future of work?
Yeah, sure. I was just saying that if you look at the trends of young people who are graduating now, having a minimum of 7 careers and a minimum of 20 jobs. The amount of change and amount of resilience and pivoting that's going to happen in the future really requires that way of thinking. That if you think back, one generation, people just didn't think that way about their career. So what student programs can we put in place now to enable that mindset that, some organizations call it learnability, where you're willing to learn new things all the time, kind of as you pivot, and also being able to do so if you've had an involuntary transition. I think these are the types of skills, skill sets and mindsets, we say at JA, that young people are going to need.
I love that. I love that learnability. I have not heard that. We use that a lot in our work. We create distinctions within cultures around. There's really three tools you have to shape a culture. You've got leadership, you got management, and you got coaching, and those are very different skills. And it's like a Venn diagram. They overlap, but they are very distinct in how you need to use them. And that learnability for me falls in that third bucket of coaching. Creating a coaching culture is one where people have the psychological safety to just be real with each other, to say what they know and say what they don't know, and then they can help each other grow and learn. One of my great dreams is to put a stake in the heart of every performance evaluation that exists in this world, because you don't need it anymore. You're just always learning every day, and you're helping each other become more and more conscious, and taking your skills and your intellectual skills, your emotional skills to the next level. And you don't need an evaluation. So as you think about this, kind of comes full circle to where we started. This idea of mentorship and coaching, I would say, are very different. Very different also. So what would you say to the leaders out there around where should they be spending their energy if they want to become a more effective leader, a more effective manager, a more effective coach, more effective mentor? What do you think they should be spending their energy on?
Well, they should be asking questions. They should be curious. I would start with that. That's one of the first principles of coaching style leadership. It's not telling people what to do, is asking for insights, asking for opinions, and asking questions. Even the question, one of my favorite questions, Michael Bungay Stanier has written this book called The Coaching Habit. I don't know if you've heard of it. Yep. Really great book. It's all about asking questions, and he's got like 5 key questions. And one of them is simply, and what else? That simple question, I use it very effectively actually in management now and then. When you really want to get at the heart of the issue, if you ask and what else once or twice, you might get more detail and insight. But if you ask it 4 times, by the 4th time, it's about something personal and very authentic that the person is going through in their personal life. And you will very quickly get to that vulnerable element of the relationship that allows it to actually get stronger once you get through it. So I'd recommend, if I could share advice for other leaders, to ask and what else, and you'll get there pretty fast.
Yeah, to keep layering. It's like an onion. You keep digging deeper into what does the person think. It's what I was doing with you, frankly, when I was asking you about why you're doing what you're doing. And every time you answered it, you kind of went a little bit deeper. You shared a little bit more of who you are with the audience, with the world. And so couldn't agree more. It's tremendously powerful. By the way, it's a tremendously powerful parenting technique too, I've found, especially for young tweens and teens.
Yeah, I could see it working with tweens. My 16, almost 17-year-old twins, if I gave them an and what else, they might roll their eyes at me. So it works up to a point.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I meant more just sort of open-ended questions. What else is technically an open-ended question? My business partner would say to his daughters when they were young, I've got a perspective on that if you're interested. And he would wait. And if they said yes, he'd give it to him. If they said no, or anything other than an emphatic yes, he would just walk away.
Oh, that's smart.
And he said it really worked effectively with teenage girls, because coaching is only coaching if it's asked for. And as parents, we tend to give them coaching, at a certain age, it's different, obviously. But, when you start to get to the developmental age, you really got to give their permission, if you want to be effective. Otherwise, they're not going to probably listen to it. They might do the opposite, frankly. That's why I love this podcast. We just cover it all, Asheesh. We're all over the place. Well, let's see. Why don't you wrap up with just any final thoughts you have on culture or leadership, and then give us your book recommendation.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the book recommendation first, because it does to some degree tie it to culture. So it's a book which I read when I was in my, probably high school years. It's called The Magic of Thinking Big. It's one of the classic books. It's like over 1 million copies sold, I'm sure, is written on the cover somewhere. I think David Schwartz is the guy who wrote it. What I like about the book, and I think it's aged well. Some books haven't, but I think this one has aged well. One of the great insights in the book is it doesn't actually take that much more work to add a couple of zeros onto any goal or initiative that you're aspiring to reach. But it fundamentally changes the way you spend your time and your mindset when you add a couple of zeros. It could be a revenue goal, it could be a impact goal, it could be an operational target, or even a financial target. But I've found that when I force myself, or I surround myself with people who encourage me to add those zeros, it opens up the creative energy to do some pretty impactful, amazing things. So, and I think it ties to your question about culture, because we've tried to do that at JA, and it's really pushed us to do more with technology, stuff we were probably scared to do before. Mm-hmm. It's made us realize, a bit like Amazon and Zappos did, there are things that you can learn and do online that a few years ago people would have thought, no way, you'll never be able to find your spouse online or buy your shoes online. You'll never be able to learn how to be an entrepreneur online, but you can do all those things now. And all these ways to use technology, I think, are only possible because you start to think big and you start to add zeros on your goals and objectives.
I love that. I love that. It's like it ties perfectly with a unique capacity that only we humans have, which is to dream, to literally see a future that doesn't exist, and then to live into that future. Fantastic. I've not read that. I'm gonna have to check that out. I wrote it down. Well, this is great, Asheesh. It's been great to talk with you, and great to meet you. And just thanks for the work you and your team are doing, because it really is changing millions of lives in a very real way. So thank you.
Well, Tom, it's a pleasure to be part of this. And I do hope that this is helpful to some people who listen. So thank you.